On July 26, 2023, something unprecedented happened in the United States Congress. A decorated Air Force veteran and former intelligence officer named David Grush sat before the House Oversight Committee and testified under oath that the United States government possesses multiple craft of non-human origin, not debris, not fragments, complete vehicles, and biological evidence, bodies, entities that are not human. He stated this plainly, calmly, with the weight of his 30-year career behind him, knowing that lying to Congress under oath carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years. The hearing was broadcast live on national television. Millions of people watched. Major news networks covered it. For about 48 hours, it seemed like humanity was finally getting the disclosure we have been promised for decades. And then, as quickly as it appeared in the headlines, the story vanished. The news cycle moved on to the next distraction. Congress held no immediate follow-up hearings despite the explosive testimony. No investigations were launched that the public could see. The moment passed as if it had never happened. But here is what most people missed. What David Grush said, and more importantly, what he could not say under oath without classified evidence, he was not permitted to share publicly, points to something far more complex and disturbing than simple alien visitation. This is not a story about extraterrestrial tourists or scientific observers from another planet stopping by Earth out of curiosity. This is a war, a cosmic war, and it has been happening for thousands of years. A war between factions that may have created humanity or at least manipulated our development, factions that have been fighting over who gets to control this planet, who gets to control us, and what happens to human consciousness during life and after death. David Grush was not the only military whistleblower who testified that day. Commander David Fravor, a retired Navy pilot, described his encounter with a craft in 2004 that moved in ways that defied all known physics. It accelerated instantly. It had no visible propulsion. It seemed to anticipate his flight path before he made maneuvers, as if it could read his intentions. Ryan Graves, another former Navy pilot, testified that these encounters are not rare. They happen regularly. His squadron saw these objects almost daily off the East Coast for years, and the military knows. They have been tracking this. They have protocols, they have evidence, and they have been lying to the public about it for decades. Now, why would they lie? The standard explanation is that they do not want to cause panic, that humanity is not ready for the truth. But that explanation falls apart when you look at the details. We have been watching alien invasion movies for 100 years. Science fiction has prepared us psychologically for the idea of non-human intelligence. Poll after poll shows that most people already believe extraterrestrial life exists. The panic excuse does not hold water. So what is the real reason for the cover-up? The answer becomes clearer when you stop thinking about this as aliens versus humans and start thinking about it as factions versus factions, with humanity caught in the middle. The ancient Sumerian tablets, which we have discussed in previous videos, describe exactly this scenario. They describe the Anunnaki, beings who came to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago, and they describe a split among them, a civil war. Enlil, the commander who wanted humanity, kept ignorant and enslaved as a labor force. Enki, the scientist who created us and then broke the rules to give us knowledge, consciousness, the ability to question and potentially free ourselves. That conflict, according to the tablets, never ended. It just went underground. Or more accurately, it went into the shadows of human institutions. Look at the geopolitical landscape today through this lens, and suddenly patterns emerge that make no sense, from a conventional perspective but make perfect sense if you understand there is a larger game being played. Why do major governments, countries with different ideologies, different cultures, different official religions, all maintain the exact same policy on the extraterrestrial question? Deny, debunk, ridicule. Why does Russia, China, the United States, the European powers all follow the same script? Because they are not actually in opposition at the highest levels. They are coordinated, controlled by the same underlying power structure, a structure that answers to something non-human. The factions that David Grush and other whistleblowers are indirectly referencing have been identified in various traditions under different names. In modern UFO research, they are often categorized as reptilians and Nordics. The reptilian faction, according to multiple researchers and supposed abductees, is associated with control, hierarchy, domination, and the suppression of human consciousness. They are the Enlil faction, the ones who see Earth as a resource to be exploited and humans as property to be managed. The The Nordic faction, described as more human-looking, taller, often blonde, is associated with the Enki lineage. The ones who allegedly want to see humanity evolve, awaken, and break free from control. But do not mistake this for pure benevolence. This is still a power struggle. We are still the prize being fought over. These factions do not fight openly with spacecraft battles in the sky. They fight through proxy, through human institutions, through governments, corporations, religious organizations, and secret societies that have been established over millennia to maintain control structures on their behalf. Every major war, every economic collapse, every political upheaval serves one side or the other in this larger conflict. The question is not whether war is happening. The question is which side is winning at any given moment, and which side controls which piece of the board. Look at the current state of global affairs. The conflict in Ukraine, the tensions with China over Taiwan, the instability in the Middle East, the economic warfare between power blocs. On the surface, these appear to be human conflicts over resources, territory, and ideology. But when you map which governments align with which faction based on their treatment of their populations, their stance on consciousness expansion, their policies on technology and information control, a different picture emerges. Russia and China, with their heavy surveillance states, social credit systems, and suppression of individual freedom, align with the control faction. The Western powers, despite their obvious corruption and manipulation, at least maintain the appearance of individual liberty and have populations that are more difficult to openly enslave, which suggests influence from the faction that wants humanity to retain some degree of autonomy, even if only to serve their different agenda. But here is where it gets even more interesting. The disclosure that is happening now, the fact that whistleblowers like Grush are being allowed to testify, the fact that the Pentagon has admitted to having a UAP task force, the fact that Navy pilots are going on record about encounters, all of this suggests a shift. One faction is losing its grip on the secrecy, the other is forcing disclosure, and disclosure is not happening because they suddenly care about truth. It is happening because the faction pushing it believes revelation serves their strategic interest in this cosmic war. My name is Mr. H, and if you have been following this channel, you know we do not do surface-level conspiracy theories here. We go deep. We connect ancient texts to modern events. We look at the patterns that mainstream sources ignore or actively suppress. If you are new here and what you are hearing resonates, if you are tired of being lied to and you want to understand what is really happening on this planet, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because over the next 2 hours, we are going to map this war in detail. We are going to show you exactly how they harvest human consciousness for energy. We are going to reveal the technology they are hiding that would free humanity overnight if released. And we are going to give you practical steps for choosing which side you are on, because whether you realize it or not, your consciousness, your choices, your awakening or continued sleep matters in this conflict. So back to the current moment. Why now? Why is disclosure accelerating in 2023 and 2024 after 70+ years of denial? Because we are approaching a tipping point. The Mayan calendar marked 2012 as the end of a cycle, but that was not an ending. It was the beginning of a transition period. Hindu texts describe this as the shift from Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and materialism, into a new age of awakening. The Hopi prophecy speaks of the end of the fourth world and emergence into the fifth. Multiple ancient traditions point to this time period as significant, not because of superstition, but because they were tracking cycles, astronomical cycles, consciousness cycles, and the cycles of this cosmic war. The faction that wants humanity awakened is making moves. They are allowing disclosure. They are supporting the information age, the internet, the spread of knowledge that was previously gatekept by institutions. They know that an awakened humanity is harder to control by the domination faction, but serves their purposes in different ways. Meanwhile, the control faction is panicking. They are ramping up surveillance. They are pushing digital currency and social credit systems. They are weaponizing artificial intelligence to monitor and manipulate on scales never before possible. They are trying to lock down control before too many people wake up. And this is where you come in. Every human being alive right now is a participant in this war, whether they know it or not. Every choice you make to remain unconscious, to accept the official narrative, to stay distracted and compliant, strengthens one side. Every choice you make to question, to seek truth, to expand your consciousness and reclaim your sovereignty, strengthens the other. You are not a bystander, you are a soldier. The battlefield is your mind, and the weapon is information. The testimony of David Grush before Congress was not just about crashed spacecraft and alien bodies. It was a signal, a move in the game, an acknowledgement that the truth can no longer be completely suppressed. What comes next depends on how many people are paying attention and what they choose to do with the information. There is a facility on the border between Switzerland and France that most people have heard of, but very few actually understand. The European Organization for Nuclear Research, known as CERN, operates the largest and most powerful particle accelerator ever built, the Large Hadron Collider, a ring 27 kilometers in circumference, buried 100 meters underground. The official story is that scientists use this machine to smash particles together at nearly the speed of light to study the fundamental building blocks of matter. They discovered the Higgs boson in 2012, which was celebrated as a major breakthrough in physics. The project cost over $13 billion of public money from multiple governments. And if you ask any mainstream scientist what CERN does, they will tell you it advances our understanding of the universe through particle physics research. But there is another side to CERN that does not make it into the press releases, a side that involves symbolism, ritual, and stated intentions from the scientists themselves that sound less like physics and more like something out of an occult grimoire. And when you start looking at what is actually happening at this facility, a very different picture emerges. A picture that suggests CERN is not just studying particles. It is opening doorways to dimensions that were meant to stay closed, and potentially inviting something through. Let us start with the symbolism, because symbols matter, they are a language, and the people who built CERN chose very specific symbols to represent their work. Outside the main facility stands a statue of Shiva, not a small statue, a massive statue of the Hindu god known as Shiva Nataraja, Shiva the Destroyer, Shiva performing the cosmic dance of destruction and creation. Now, you might think this is just an artistic choice, a nod to the transformative nature of the research, except Shiva is specifically associated with the destruction of worlds. One of Shiva's titles is Destroyer of Worlds, and this statue was a gift from the Indian government when CERN was established, positioned prominently at the entrance, as if blessing or marking the work being done inside. Then there is the CERN logo itself, 3 interlocking circles that form the shape of sixes, 666. The number associated in Christian tradition with the mark of the beast, with demonic forces, with the antithesis of the divine. CERN claims the logo simply represents the accelerator's circular structure, but graphic designers will tell you there are infinite ways to represent circles and acceleration. The choice to make it look specifically like 3 sixes is intentional. Whether you believe in the spiritual significance of that number or not, the people who designed that logo knew exactly what they were doing. And then there is the Gotthard Tunnel opening ceremony. In 2016, when Switzerland opened the Gotthard Base Tunnel, the longest railway tunnel in the world and a feat of engineering closely associated with CERN's presence in the region, they held an opening ceremony. This was not a ribbon cutting with champagne and speeches. This was a bizarre, occult performance broadcast on television. The ceremony featured actors dressed as demonic figures, people in trance states, a baby in a carriage being presented to a horned beast, simulated sexual acts, and imagery that looked like it came straight out of a satanic ritual. This was an official state ceremony, attended by European leaders, and it was absolutely dripping with occult symbolism. When questioned about it, officials said it was simply avant-garde art, celebrating the workers who built the tunnel. But watch the footage yourself. That explanation does not hold up. Now, all of this could be dismissed as weird artistic choices if it were not for what happened in 2016 at CERN itself. A video leaked online showing a group of people in black robes performing what appeared to be a mock human sacrifice in front of the Shiva statue on CERN grounds. A woman in white is led to the center of a circle. The robed figures surround her. One of them appears to stab her. She collapses. The whole thing is captured on camera from a window overlooking the courtyard. When the video went viral, CERN issued a statement saying it was a prank by scientists, that the individuals involved were identified and sanctioned for improper conduct. They tried to downplay it as a joke in bad taste. But here is the problem with that explanation. These are not random people. These are elite scientists working at the most advanced physics facility in the world. They have doctorates, they have security clearance, and they chose, for fun apparently, to stage a mock occult sacrifice in front of a statue of the Destroyer of Worlds at a facility that is literally trying to recreate the conditions of the Big Bang. You do not do that as a joke unless the joke is revealing something real that you know about but are not supposed to talk about publicly. So what is really happening at CERN? To understand that, you have to listen to what the scientists themselves have said. In 2012, Sergio Bertolucci, who was the Director for Research in Scientific Computing at CERN, gave an interview where he said, and this is a direct quote, that the Large Hadron Collider could open a doorway to another dimension. He said it might be possible to create or discover some extra dimension. He used the word doorway, not metaphorically. He was talking about literally opening a passage to somewhere else. Stephen Hawking, before his death, warned that the experiments at CERN could potentially create a catastrophic vacuum decay that would destroy the entire universe. He was not being hyperbolic. He was describing a theoretical physics scenario where the Higgs field could be destabilized and collapse, taking all of reality with it. Other physicists have raised concerns about microscopic black holes, about strangelets, about things we do not understand being brought into existence. But the experiments continue. Now, let us connect this to the larger framework we have been discussing. The Gnostic texts describe entities called Archons, rulers of this reality, beings that exist in dimensions adjacent to our physical world, but need ways to manifest here, to influence here, to feed here. According to these ancient texts, the Archons created or control the material world as a prison for consciousness. They feed on human emotional energy, particularly fear and suffering, but they are not fully physical. They need gateways. They need portals. They need rituals and technology to bridge the gap between their dimension and ours. For thousands of years, these portals were opened through occult ritual, blood sacrifice, specific geometric patterns, invocations and summoning ceremonies performed by secret societies and mystery schools who understood the technology of consciousness and dimension. But those methods were limited. They could only open small doorways, temporary breaches. What if you wanted something bigger? What if you wanted a permanent gateway? What if you wanted to bring something massive through from the other side? You would need massive energy. You would need to literally tear a hole in the fabric of space-time. And the Large Hadron Collider, smashing particles together at near light speed, generates more concentrated energy in a single point than anything else humans have ever built. It recreates the conditions of the Big Bang, the moment when, according to mainstream physics, dimensions separated and the universe as we know it came into being. If dimensions separated at that moment, then recreating those conditions could theoretically reverse the process, could merge dimensions, could open the doorway. This is not wild speculation. This is based on what the scientists at CERN have publicly stated they are trying to do. They talk openly about searching for extra dimensions. They talk about finding evidence of parallel universes. They talk about making contact with something beyond our reality. The only difference between their language and the language of ancient summoning rituals is the vocabulary. They say particles and dimensions. The ancients said spirits and gateways. But they are describing the same thing. And here is where it gets even stranger. There is a phenomenon that exploded into public consciousness right around the time CERN went fully operational. The Mandela effect. The collective experience of remembering something differently than how it currently exists. Thousands, sometimes millions of people remember the Berenstain Bears, spelled with an E-I-N, but it is actually Berenstain, with an A-I-N, always has been. According to every book, every official record, people remember the Monopoly Man having a monocle. He never did. People remember the line from Star Wars as, "Luke, I am your father." It is actually, "No, I am your father." People remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, which is where the phenomenon gets its name. He actually died in 2013. Now, mainstream psychology dismisses the Mandela effect as false memory, as confabulation, as the brain filling in gaps. But that does not explain why so many people have the exact same false memory. Why entire populations remember the same incorrect details. One explanation that has gained traction is that CERN's experiments are not just opening doorways to other dimensions. They are shifting timelines, merging parallel realities, creating ripples in the fabric of existence that cause inconsistencies in our collective memory, because we are literally being moved between slightly different versions of reality. Is this provable? No, but it is a hypothesis that fits the data better than mass delusion, and it aligns perfectly with what CERN scientists say they are doing. If you collapse wave functions on a massive scale, if you manipulate quantum fields with the kind of energy CERN produces, you are not just observing reality, you are changing it. And if the Archons, these interdimensional entities that the Gnostic texts warned about, are trying to find a way into our dimension, into our timeline, What better tool than a machine that can merge dimensions and shift timelines? The question is not whether CERN is doing occult work disguised as science. The evidence suggests they absolutely are. The question is whether they know what they are trying to summon, whether they are doing it intentionally in service to these entities, or whether they are useful fools, thinking they are advancing human knowledge while actually opening the door for something that has been waiting on the other side for a very long time. Something that wants in, something that feeds on us, something that, according to every ancient tradition that warned about this, should never be allowed through. Before we continue, I am genuinely curious. Where in the world are you right now? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this information is reaching. Are you in New York, London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Sydney? And what time is it there? Are you watching this late at night because you could not sleep and something pulled you to search for answers? Or maybe it is early morning and this is how you are starting your day, questioning everything before the world tells you what to think. Let me know. Because understanding that people all over the planet are waking up to these same truths at the same time tells me something important. This is not random. This is synchronicity on a global scale. And if the doorway opens fully, if CERN succeeds in creating a stable portal to the dimension where the Archons exist, the cosmic war we talked about in the last section escalates to a whole new level. Because suddenly, the Control faction has a direct line to their masters, and humanity loses the thin protection we have had from these entities remaining mostly in the shadows. They come through, they manifest, and the harvest we are about to discuss in the next sections becomes industrial, efficient, inescapable, unless enough people wake up to what is happening and refuse to feed the system. If you wanted to control a planet for thousands of years, you would not do it by constantly invading and occupying with visible force. That creates resistance. That creates revolution. Instead, you would install a management class. A small group of families who carry your genetics, who serve your interests, and who maintain power through heredity while appearing to be human leaders making human decisions. You would give them resources, knowledge, and technological advantages that keep them ahead of everyone else. And you would make sure they only breed within their approved circles to keep the bloodline pure and the loyalty intact. This is exactly what we see when we map the power structure of Earth. Not democracies, not elected governments representing the will of the people, but a network of interrelated families who have controlled banking, industry, media, and politics for centuries. Families whose genealogies trace back to royal houses, who maintain membership in exclusive organizations, and who display a level of coordination across national boundaries that makes no sense unless you understand they answer to a power above nations. Let us start with the names everyone has heard but few have truly investigated. Rothschild, Rockefeller, Warburg, Morgan. These are not just wealthy families, these are dynasties that have shaped the entire financial architecture of the modern world. The Rothschild family, originally from Frankfurt, established banking houses across Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries. By the time of the Napoleonic Wars, they had representatives in London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt, all brothers from the same family, coordinating financial strategies across nations that were supposedly at war with each other. They financed both sides. They always finance both sides, because when you control the money supply, you control the outcome, regardless of who wins the battle. Nathan Rothschild famously said, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls the British money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." That was in the 1800s. The same principle applies today, expanded globally. Central banks in nearly every country operate on the same model, a model developed and promoted by these families. The Federal Reserve, established in 1913 after a secret meeting on Jekyll Island involving representatives from the Rockefeller and Morgan empires, is not federal and has no reserves. It is a private banking cartel given the power to create money and charge interest on it to the United States government. The people do not know this. They think the Federal Reserve is a government institution. It is not. The Rockefeller family took a different approach, but with the same result. John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil into a monopoly so complete that the government had to break it up in 1911. Except breaking it up just created multiple companies the family still controlled. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, all Rockefeller descendants. The family then moved into pharmaceuticals, funding the American Medical Association and shaping medical education to favor drug-based treatments over natural medicine. They funded the General Education Board, which redesigned the American school system to produce obedient workers instead of critical thinkers. Their own documents, which we discussed in previous videos, explicitly state this goal. But here is what connects this to the Anunnaki and the cosmic war. These families do not just have wealth, they have bloodlines they protect obsessively. European royalty, which these banking families eventually married into, has always practiced intermarriage to a degree that is biologically dangerous. Hemophilia spread through royal houses because cousins married cousins for generations. The official explanation is that they wanted to keep power and wealth within noble lines. But there is another reason: genetics. Specific genetics that trace back to something non-human. We discussed Rh-negative blood in previous videos. The fact that 15% of humans lack a protein that all primates have, suggesting a genetic source outside the normal evolutionary line. Rh-negative blood is concentrated in European populations, and especially in royal bloodlines. Why would ruling families obsessively preserve a blood type unless that blood type mattered for reasons beyond medicine, unless it marked them as carriers of something that connects them to the Anunnaki, to the creators, to the factions fighting for control of Earth? The families running the planet today are not just wealthy and connected, they are genetically franchised. They are the hybrid management class installed by the non-human factions to run things on the ground level, and they maintain their position through both visible and invisible power structures. The visible structures are corporations, banks, and governments. The invisible structures are organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group. These are not conspiracy theories. These are documented organizations with membership lists, meeting schedules, and stated goals of shaping global policy. The Council on Foreign Relations, established in 1921, has included nearly every US Secretary of State, Defense Secretary, and CIA Director since World War II. The Bilderberg Group has been meeting annually since 1954, bringing together heads of state, CEOs, and media owners for closed-door discussions that are never reported to the public. Attendee lists leak occasionally, and you see the same names and families appearing year after year: Rockefeller, Rothschild, Kissinger, until his recent death. These meetings set policy that entire nations then follow, yet no one elected these people to make those decisions. And then there is the phenomenon that cannot be explained away: the Black Eye Club. Do a search right now for images of world leaders, celebrities, and powerful figures with black eyes. You will find hundreds: the Pope, Prince Philip, George W. Bush, John Kerry, members of the Rothschild family, celebrities like Brad Pitt and Robert Downey Jr., all photographed at various times with a black eye, specifically the left eye, often with the same injury pattern, a swollen, bruised left eye socket. The official explanations are always mundane. They walked into a door, they had a minor accident, they were hit by a piece of exercise equipment. But when you see the sheer number of powerful people, all with the same injury, all on the same eye, all around the same time in their rise to prominence, pattern recognition kicks in. This is a marker, an initiation symbol, evidence of a ritual that those entering or maintaining their position within the control structure must undergo. What that ritual involves, we can only speculate based on testimonies from people who claim to have left these circles. But the photographic evidence is undeniable. Something is happening to these people, something they all share. Another pattern emerges when you look at how these families operate across supposed enemy lines. During World War II, companies owned by American elites supplied both the Allies and Nazi Germany. IBM provided the punch card technology that made the Holocaust logistically possible. Ford built trucks for the Wehrmacht. Standard Oil sold fuel to the German military through neutral countries. And after the war, instead of being prosecuted for treason, these companies and families became more powerful. Why? Because the war itself was the point, not which side won. The war generated massive profits, massive trauma, massive death, and massive loosh energy for harvest. The families managing Earth orchestrated it from both sides. This is how the bloodline network operates. They create conflicts that appear to be between nations or ideologies, but at the highest level, both sides are controlled by the same group. They fund revolutions, and then fund the suppression of those revolutions. They crash economies they control, and then buy assets at pennies on the dollar during the collapse. They run both political parties in democratic systems, ensuring that no matter who wins, policy continues in the direction they want. The illusion of choice. The illusion of democracy. but the same families remain in power generation after generation. And these families know things the general population does not. They have access to suppressed technology. They have access to ancient knowledge preserved from pre-flood civilizations. They communicate with or receive instructions from the non-human intelligences they serve. Whether you call those intelligences Archons, Anunnaki, reptilians, or simply the Control faction, the result is the same. Earth is run by a hybrid managerial class whose loyalty is not to humanity, but to the entities who installed them. And their job is to keep humanity divided, distracted, harvested, and most importantly, unconscious of the fact that we are living in a managed system designed to benefit something that is not us. The question is not whether this network exists. The evidence is overwhelming and documented. The question is what we do now that we see it. In 1958, a radio executive and successful businessman named Robert Monroe started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences. He was not seeking them. He was not involved in any spiritual practices. He was a pragmatic, rational man who suddenly found himself floating above his physical body, fully conscious, able to move through walls and explore dimensions of reality that were not supposed to exist according to mainstream science. Instead of dismissing these experiences as hallucinations, Monroe did something unusual. He treated them as data. He began documenting everything, developing techniques to induce and control these states, and eventually founded an institute dedicated to researching human consciousness. What Monroe discovered during his explorations beyond the physical realm was documented in his books, particularly Far Journeys, published in 1985. And buried in those accounts is a concept that changes everything about how we understand human existence on Earth. Monroe described encountering non-physical entities, intelligences that existed in other dimensions, who referred to Earth as a farm, not metaphorically, literally, a farm where something is being harvested. And the crop is not wheat or cattle. The crop is emotional energy produced by human beings. Monroe said these entities had a specific word for this energy, LOOSH. According to what Monroe was shown during his out-of-body travels, LOOSH is a type of energy that only sentient, emotional beings can produce. It is generated through experience, particularly intense experience. Joy produces LOOSH. Love produces LOOSH. But negative emotions produce far more. Fear, grief, rage, despair, pain. These generate LOOSH at levels exponentially higher than positive emotions. And Earth, according to these entities Monroe encountered, was specifically designed and maintained as an optimal LOOSH production facility. Billions of humans, most of them suffering to varying degrees throughout their lives, generating massive amounts of harvestable emotional energy. Now, you might be thinking this sounds like science fiction, except Monroe was not a fringe figure. He was not a guru or a conspiracy theorist. He was a businessman who stumbled into non-ordinary reality and reported what he found. More importantly, his work caught the attention of the United States military and intelligence community. The CIA became extremely interested in Monroe's techniques for inducing altered states of consciousness. Why? Because if consciousness can leave the body, if it can access other dimensions, then it can potentially gather intelligence from places physical spies cannot reach. This led to the development of the Gateway Process, a training program created by the Monroe Institute and adopted by the CIA in the 1980s. The program taught military personnel and intelligence operatives how to achieve out-of-body states using specific audio frequencies and meditation techniques. The CIA commissioned an analysis of the Gateway Process in 1983. That report was classified for decades. When it was finally declassified in 2003 under a Freedom of Information Act request, large portions were still redacted. But what remained was stunning. The report validated Monroe's work. It confirmed that consciousness can separate from the physical body. It described reality as a hologram. It discussed how time is not linear outside of physical perception. And it acknowledged that entities exist in non-physical dimensions. The CIA does not spend millions of dollars and decades of research on things that do not work. If they invested that heavily in consciousness research based on Monroe's findings, then what Monroe discovered about LOOSH deserves serious consideration. These entities he encountered were not lying for entertainment. They were explaining the actual structure of reality as they understand it, and according to them, human emotional energy is valuable. Valuable enough to design an entire planetary system around harvesting it. Think about how Earth is structured. Every living thing survives by consuming other living things. Plants consume nutrients. Animals consume plants or other animals. Humans consume everything. It is a hierarchy of consumption, of feeding, that goes all the way down the biological chain. What if that hierarchy extends beyond the physical? What if there are levels of existence that feed on consciousness itself, on the energy produced by aware, emotional beings experiencing intense states? And what if humans, with our complex emotional ranges and our capacity for extreme suffering, are the livestock? This is not a new idea. Ancient Gnostic texts describe the Archons as entities that feed on human fear and pain. Hindu and Buddhist teachings describe realms of hungry ghosts and entities that consume the life force of beings trapped in samsara, the cycle of birth and death and suffering. Indigenous shamanic traditions across the world speak of spirits and entities that feed on emotional distress. The terminology changes across cultures, but the core concept remains consistent. Something non-physical feeds on something humans produce through emotional experience. Robert Monroe even described how the harvesting works. According to the entities he communicated with, LOOSH is collected during life, but also at death. The moment of death, especially traumatic death, produces an enormous burst of LOOSH. This is why wars are so valuable to these harvesters. Millions of people dying in terror and agony, all at once, creates a feast. Natural disasters, famines, plagues, all of these generate mass LOOSH production. And the entities that feed on this have structured human civilization to ensure a steady supply. Consider the design of modern life. You are born into debt. Your parents take on debt to raise you. You take on debt to get educated. You take on debt to buy a home, a car, the basic necessities of existence. You spend your entire adult life working to pay off debt, which is just another word for slavery with extra steps. You are kept stressed, overworked, underpaid, and afraid. Afraid of losing your job, afraid of medical bankruptcy, afraid of not having enough for retirement, afraid of violence, terrorism, economic collapse. The system is designed to keep you in a state of chronic low-level fear, punctuated by occasional spikes of intense emotional pain, breakups, deaths of loved ones, illness, betrayal, failure, and all of that generates LOOSH. Entertainment and media are structured the same way. Why is the news 90% negative? Why do horror movies exist? Why is the most popular content online designed to provoke outrage, fear, or sadness? Because those emotions are being farmed. Every time you watch a tragedy unfold on screen and feel that visceral emotional response, you are producing LOOSH. Every time you scroll through social media and feel inadequate, angry, or afraid, you are producing LOOSH. The algorithms are optimized for engagement, yes, but engagement means emotional activation, and emotional activation means harvest. Even institutions that claim to provide comfort are part of the system. Religion promises salvation but keeps people in fear of hell, in guilt over sin, in subservience to authorities who claim to speak for God. People spend entire lives terrified of divine punishment, confessing their unworthiness, begging for forgiveness. That is LOOSH production. Hospitals keep people alive but often in states of prolonged suffering. End-of-life care can extend dying for months or years, maximizing the fear and pain extracted before death. The compassionate thing would be to allow peaceful transitions. But the system is not designed for compassion. It is designed for harvest. Now, the question becomes, if LOOSH is real, if entities are farming human emotional energy, where does it go? Monroe described collection points, places where LOOSH accumulates before being transferred to wherever these entities reside. Ancient temples were often built on specific geographic locations, on ley lines, points where Earth's electromagnetic field creates natural vortexes. These were not just spiritual centers, they were collection stations. Sacrifices performed at these locations, whether animal or human, generated intense LOOSH that could be channeled through the architecture and geometry of the temple structure to wherever it needed to go. Modern cities are built the same way. Major urban centers sit on the same ley line intersections that ancient sacred sites occupied. Except now, instead of temples, you have stadiums where thousands of people gather and experience intense collective emotion. You have stock exchanges where fear and greed pulse through traders every second. You have hospitals, prisons, slaughterhouses, all generating different frequencies of LOOSH in concentrated areas. The architecture may look secular, but the function is identical. Collection, amplification, transmission. And if you are starting to feel disturbed by this, good. That disturbance is recognition. Some part of you knows this is true, Because you have felt it. You have felt the weight of a system designed to extract everything from you while giving back just enough to keep you functional. You have felt used, drained, farmed, because you are. We all are. The question is not whether loosh harvesting happens. The question is whether you are going to continue feeding the system unconsciously or whether you are going to starve it deliberately. September 11th, 2001. If you were alive and conscious that day, you remember exactly where you were when you heard. The images are burned into collective memory. 2 planes hitting the Twin Towers. The buildings collapsing. The Pentagon struck. A field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people dead. A nation traumatized. The world watching in horror. And in the weeks and months that followed, fear became the dominant emotion across entire populations. Fear of terrorism. Fear of war. Fear of the other. That fear was used to justify invasions, surveillance states, the erosion of civil liberties, and trillions of dollars in military spending. 23 years later, we are still living in the world that 9/11 created. But what if the official narrative, the one about 19 hijackers with box cutters executing the most sophisticated terror attack in history from caves in Afghanistan, is not the real story? What if 9/11 was not a failure of intelligence or a surprise attack, but a deliberately orchestrated event designed to achieve multiple objectives simultaneously? And what if one of those objectives, perhaps the primary one, was the largest single loosh harvesting ritual in modern history? Let us start with something most people do not think about. The date itself, September 11th. In American notation, 9/11. 9 plus 1 plus 1 equals 11. In occult numerology, 11 is a master number. It represents doorways, transitions between states, the connection between the physical and spiritual realms. It is a power number used in ritual magic for centuries. The Twin Towers themselves stood as 2 ones, 11. They were struck in New York, a city with 11 letters. The first plane to hit was Flight 11. It had 92 passengers. 9 plus 2 equals 11. The second plane, Flight 175, had 65 passengers. 1 plus 7 plus 5 equals 13. 6 plus 5 equals 11. You can dismiss 1 or 2 of these as coincidence, but when the same number appears over and over in every aspect of an event, when it is woven into the date, the targets, the flight numbers, the casualty counts, that is not random, that is design, that is signature. And in occult practice, numbers are not decorative, they are functional, they encode intention, they create resonance, they amplify the ritual's power. Now consider the target, the World Trade Center, 2 towers dominating the New York skyline. In esoteric symbolism, twin pillars represent the gateway between worlds. In Freemasonry, the twin pillars are called Boaz and Jachin, standing at the entrance to Solomon's temple. They represent duality, strength, and establishment, the material and the spiritual. Destroying twin pillars in ritual magic symbolizes the collapse of the old order and the opening of a gateway to something new. The towers fell, and through that destruction, a new era began. An era of permanent war, permanent surveillance, permanent fear. The gateway opened, and something came through. The timing is equally significant. 9/11 happened exactly 911 days before the Madrid train bombings on March 11, 2004. That is not approximate. That is exact. And March 11th can be written as 311 in American dating, another master number. These events are spaced with mathematical precision, suggesting coordination at a level far beyond what terrorist cells could achieve. Someone is counting. Someone is calculating. Someone is using these events as markers in a larger ritual calendar. The Patriot Act, the legislation that stripped away constitutional protections and gave the government unprecedented surveillance powers, was introduced to Congress on October 23, 2001. That is 42 days after 9/11. But here is the problem. The Patriot Act is a massive document, hundreds of pages of complex legal language. There is no way it was written in 42 days as a response to the attacks. It was written before. It was waiting. 9/11 was the excuse to pass it. The crisis that made the unthinkable acceptable. Create the problem, generate the reaction, implement the solution you had planned all along. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented historical pattern called problem-reaction-solution, and it has been used by ruling powers for centuries. But let us go deeper into the loosh aspect, because this is where the ritual nature becomes undeniable. On the morning of September 11th, billions of people around the world were watching, Television broadcasts showed the second plane hitting in real time, the towers collapsing in real time, people jumping from buildings in real time. This was not just reported after the fact, it was broadcast live, globally, to the largest simultaneous audience in human history up to that point. Why? Why was every camera pointed at those buildings? Why was the coverage so immediate and comprehensive? Because the ritual required witnesses. It required a global audience experiencing the trauma collectively. When you understand LOOSH, you understand that the emotional energy of billions of people feeling shock, horror, grief, and fear all at the same moment creates an energetic tsunami. That energy does not just dissipate, it goes somewhere. And if you know how to structure a ritual, if you know the geometry, the numerology, the timing, you can direct that energy. You can harvest it. The Twin Towers were not just buildings, they were tuning forks, antennae. And when they fell, they transmitted the largest pulse of human emotional energy ever generated in a single coordinated event. Survivors and first responders have reported experiences that do not fit the official narrative. People talk about hearing explosions in the buildings before the planes hit. Engineers and architects, thousands of them, have signed statements saying the collapse of the towers, especially Building 7, which was not hit by a plane, defies the laws of physics for a fire-induced collapse. Building 7 fell at free fall speed into its own footprint, exhibiting every characteristic of controlled demolition. Yet the official report barely mentions it. Why? Because acknowledging controlled demolition opens questions that destroy the entire narrative. There are testimonies, less publicized, from people who were near the towers that day, who describe seeing things that should not have been there. Figures in the smoke, shadows that moved with intention, presences that felt malevolent. Now, you can dismiss this as trauma-induced hallucination, or you can consider that if 9/11 was a mass ritual designed to open a doorway and generate LOOSH on an industrial scale, then the entities being fed, the entities invited through that doorway, might have been present, visible to those whose perception was shocked open by the horror of what they were witnessing. The geopolitical consequences of 9/11 are well documented. 2 wars launched. Afghanistan invaded within weeks. Iraq invaded 2 years later, under false pretenses about weapons of mass destruction that were never found. Millions of people dead. Entire nations destabilized. Trillions of dollars spent, and all of it generating more LOOSH, more fear, more death, more trauma. The attack itself was the initiation. The wars that followed were the sustained harvest. 23 years of continuous conflict in the Middle East. Generations of children growing up in war zones. Soldiers coming home with PTSD. Refugees fleeing in terror. All of it feeding the system. And the fear did not stay contained in war zones. It came home. Security theater at airports. Surveillance expanding into every aspect of life. The normalization of torture. The acceptance of indefinite detention without trial. A population conditioned to give up freedom for the promise of safety. To accept intrusion as protection. And underlying all of it, constant low-level fear. Fear of the next attack. Fear of the terrorist who could be anyone, anywhere. Fear that keeps people compliant, divided, and producing LOOSH. There is another layer that people miss. The date 9/11 is the emergency number in the United States. You call 911 when you are in crisis, when you are afraid, when you need help. Programming that date into collective consciousness as the day of ultimate crisis creates a feedback loop. Every time someone dials 911 in a moment of fear, they are reinforcing the ritual. Every time the date appears on a calendar, it triggers the memory, the trauma, the fear. The ritual does not end. It echoes forward through time, continuing to generate LOOSH decades after the initial event. Some researchers have pointed out that the towers resembled the number 11 not just in count but in shape. 2 tall rectangular structures standing parallel, and when they fell, they did not tip over. They collapsed straight down, as if being pulled into the earth, as if something beneath was calling them down, as if the destruction was not just physical but metaphysical, a sacrifice made to entities below or beyond, entities that required the specific geometry, the specific number, the specific emotional energy of billions of people watching in horror. Was 9/11 an inside job? That question misses the point. The question is not who physically planted explosives or flew the planes. The question is who orchestrated the ritual, who designed the numerology, who ensured global broadcast, who benefited not just politically and financially, but energetically, who harvested the LOOSH. And when you frame it that way, The answer points not to a government or a terrorist group, but to the same non-human intelligence, the same control faction that has been farming humanity for thousands of years. They have just gotten more efficient, more technologically sophisticated, more capable of generating mass trauma on demand. 9/11 was not the first mega ritual, and it will not be the last. The pattern repeats. Major events spaced with mathematical precision, coordinated to astrological and numerological significance, broadcast globally, generating maximum fear and trauma. And every time it happens, the entities being fed grow stronger, the control grid tightens, and humanity slips deeper into unconsciousness, too traumatized and afraid to question the reality being constructed around them. Unless you wake up, unless you see the pattern, unless you refuse to feed the fear. Because every person who stops generating LOOSH, who steps out of the emotional manipulation, weakens the harvest. And if enough people wake up, if enough people refuse, the entire system starves. That is the real threat. Not terrorism, not war, not disaster. The real threat to the controllers is a humanity that sees through the rituals and chooses not to participate. Wars do not start randomly. This is the lie taught in history classes, the narrative of tensions escalating, accidents spiraling out of control, leaders making rash decisions in moments of passion. But when you actually examine the timeline of major conflicts over the past 2 centuries, a different picture emerges. Wars begin on specific dates, dates that align with occult calendars, astrological events, and numerological significance. Wars are funded by the same banking families on both sides of the conflict, and wars occur in cycles, rhythmic patterns of 20 to 30 years, just long enough for one generation to forget the horror before the next generation is fed into the machine. World War I. The war to end all wars, they called it. 16 million dead, 20 million wounded. It officially began on July 28, 1914, when Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. But the assassination that triggered the declaration, the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, happened on June 28th. June 28th is St. Vitus Day, a date of deep significance in Serbian history and occult tradition. The assassin, Gavrilo Princip, was a member of the Black Hand, a secret society steeped in esoteric symbolism and ritual. He did not act alone or spontaneously. He was an initiate, following a script. The war that followed consumed Europe. Millions of young men were sent into trenches where they died in conditions of unimaginable horror. Gas attacks, artillery bombardments, charges into machine gun fire. The suffering was industrial in scale, and while soldiers died, banks profited. The Rothschild family financed Britain, France, and Germany. J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers funded American involvement. The same families, the same bloodlines we discussed earlier, made fortunes from both sides. When the war ended, they owned more of the world than when it started. And the trauma generated, the LOOSH produced by 16 million deaths and the grief of their families, was harvested on a scale never before achieved. But the war did not actually end. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, exactly 5 years after the assassination that started the war, imposed conditions on Germany so punishing that another war became inevitable. The treaty was not designed to create peace. It was designed to create the next conflict. And 20 years later, on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland and World War II began. 20 years, 1 generation, just enough time for the children who grew up during World War I to become the soldiers of World War II. This is not coincidence. This is cycle management. You cannot run continuous war because populations rebel. You need breaks. You need time to rebuild the stock, to replenish the herds, to prepare the next generation for slaughter. 20 to 30 years is optimal, long enough to forget, short enough to maintain the pattern. World War II killed 70 to 85 million people depending on estimates. The Holocaust alone, 6 million Jews and millions of others murdered in camps designed for industrial killing, produced suffering so concentrated that the LOOSH generated must have been incomprehensible in magnitude. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Dachau, these were not just death camps, they were factories, and the product was not just death, it was terror. Prolonged, systematic, ritualized terror. People forced to dig their own graves, families separated, children torn from mothers, medical experiments, all of it designed to maximize suffering before death. And again, the same families funded both sides. IBM, an American corporation, provided the punch card technology that allowed Nazis to track and process millions of people efficiently. Ford built vehicles for the German military. Standard Oil, controlled by the Rockefellers, sold fuel to Germany through intermediaries in neutral countries. These companies were never prosecuted after the war. They were never held accountable. Because the war was not actually about stopping evil, it was about harvest. And the managers of the harvest do not punish themselves. World War II ended in 1945. 20 years later, America was deep in Vietnam, a war that made no strategic sense, that the public did not support, that was sold through lies about an attack in the Gulf of Tonkin, that later evidence shows never happened the way it was reported. 58,000 Americans dead, millions of Vietnamese dead, Agent Orange poisoning the land and the people for generations. The war dragged on for a decade, generating continuous trauma, continuous loosh, continuous profit for defense contractors and banks that financed the American military machine. The Vietnam War ended in 1975. 16 years later, the Gulf War in 1991. 12 years after that, the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The pattern continues, but the intervals shorten because technology has advanced. You do not need a full generation gap anymore. Media can manufacture consent faster. Populations can be traumatized and reset more quickly. The harvest schedule accelerates. Every one of these wars was sold to the public through lies. World War I was supposed to make the world safe for democracy. World War II was about stopping fascism. Yet the Allied powers did nothing when Hitler rose to power, did nothing during the early invasions, only acted when their own interests were directly threatened. Vietnam was about stopping communism. Iraq was about weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. Afghanistan was about catching Osama bin Laden, but the war continued for 20 years after he was killed. The justifications change. The pattern does not. And the pattern extends beyond just the timing. Look at the locations. Wars cluster in specific geographic regions. The Middle East has been in continuous conflict for decades. Why? Oil is the easy answer. But there is more. The Middle East sits on some of the oldest sacred sites in human history. Babylon, Nineveh, the places where the Anunnaki established their first cities according to the Sumerian tablets, the places where the energy grid of the planet has nodes and convergence points. Fighting wars in these locations is not just about resources, it is about controlling the energy centers of Earth, about preventing humans from accessing ancient sites and ancient knowledge, about generating loosh in places where it can be channeled most effectively. The wars are also timed to astrological events. World War I began during a rare grand cross-alignment of planets. World War II escalated during significant Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, aspects associated with death, transformation, and the destruction of old orders. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 happened during a Mars retrograde in Scorpio, a placement associated with hidden violence and power struggles. You can track major military actions and they align consistently with malefic astrological transits. This is not astrology as prediction, this is astrology as technology. Knowing that certain planetary configurations amplify certain energies and timing events to take advantage of that amplification. But here is what should disturb you most. The wars never actually end. The war on terror, declared after 9/11, has no definable enemy and no victory condition. It is permanent war, endless conflict in rotating locations. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia. The list grows. Populations in these regions live in constant fear. Children are born into war, live in war, die in war, never knowing peace. And that continuous state of terror, that unending trauma, produces a steady stream of loosh. The harvest is no longer cyclical. It is continuous. Meanwhile, the populations in countries doing the invading, primarily the United States and NATO allies, are kept in a state of low-grade fear. Fear of terrorism, fear of refugees, fear of foreign threats. Soldiers sent to these wars come back broken. Suicide rates among veterans are staggering. 60,000 American veterans have died by suicide since 9/11, more than were killed in combat. That suffering, that trauma, that is also harvest. The soldiers are not heroes being honored, they are sacrifice, offered to the machine, used to generate loosh both during their service and after, when they struggle with PTSD, addiction, homelessness, and despair. And it is profitable. The military-industrial complex generates trillions of dollars. Defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman make record profits during wartime. The stock prices go up. The executives get richer. The same families that own the banks also own shares in these companies. They profit from the loans to governments and from the contracts to supply weapons. Both ends of the transaction. Every bomb dropped makes someone money, and every person killed generates loosh. The cycle is designed to be self-perpetuating. War creates refugees. Refugees create tension in host countries. Tension creates division. Division creates conflict. Conflict creates the justification for more control, more surveillance, more military spending, and the wheel turns. Populations are kept reactive, afraid, fighting each other instead of looking up to see who is running the wheel. But the schedule is not random. The managers of this system are patient. They plan in decades and centuries. They know that humans have short memories, that each generation believes its war is unique, that the lessons are never learned because the true nature of war is never taught. War is not politics by other means. War is harvest by design. And until enough people understand that, until enough people refuse to send their children to die for lies, the schedule will continue. The next war is already being prepared. The narratives are being constructed. The enemies are being identified. And the question is whether this generation will see through it or whether they will march into the machine like all the generations before them. There is a reason they call it programming, television programming, broadcast programming. The language is not accidental. When you sit in front of a screen and absorb content for hours, you are not just being entertained, you are being programmed. Your emotional responses are being conditioned. Your beliefs about reality are being shaped. And most importantly, your emotional energy is being systematically extracted and amplified through carefully designed content that keeps you in states of fear, desire, anger, and despair. Hollywood is not an art industry that happens to make money. It is a psychological operation disguised as entertainment, and the people running it, the executives, the producers, the power players whose names you never see on screen, are part of the same bloodline network we have been discussing. They understand occult symbolism. They understand frequency and vibration. They understand that stories are spells, that repetition creates belief, and that emotional engagement creates harvestable energy. Every film, every show, every award ceremony is a ritual, and you are the congregation participating without knowing what you are actually doing. Let us start with something testable: predictive programming. This is the practice of embedding imagery and narratives into fictional content that prepares the public consciousness for events that will happen later. It sounds conspiratorial until you start cataloging examples. The Lone Gunmen, a television show that aired in March of 2001, featured a plot where a secret government faction hijacks a commercial airliner and tries to fly it into the World Trade Center. This aired 6 months before 9/11. The Simpsons showed Bart Simpson holding a magazine with an image of the Twin Towers next to $9.11 in an episode from 1997. The Matrix, released in 1999, shows Neo's passport expiring on September 11th, 2001. You can find dozens of these examples. Images of the towers being destroyed appeared in films and television throughout the 1990s. Were the writers and directors psychic, or were they being fed information, consciously or unconsciously, about events being planned? Predictive programming serves multiple purposes. It primes the collective unconscious. When the actual event happens, it feels familiar. The shock is reduced because some part of the mass psyche has already processed it as fiction. This makes populations easier to control during the real event because the cognitive dissonance is lessened. But there is another function. In occult practice, you must reveal your intentions before acting. This is called the revelation of the method. By hiding the truth in plain sight, by telling people what you are going to do through fiction and symbolism, you gain their unconscious consent. When the event actually happens, and people do not rebel, do not resist, their inaction becomes permission. You were warned, you saw it coming, even if only subliminally, and you did nothing. Therefore, you agreed. Now let us talk about the content itself. Why is the majority of Hollywood output focused on violence, horror, tragedy, and fear? Why are horror films an entire genre dedicated to making people experience terror? The standard explanation is that people enjoy being scared in a controlled environment, but that does not explain the scale. Horror films make billions of dollars globally. People pay money to sit in dark rooms and experience 2 hours of fear. From a loosh harvesting perspective, this makes perfect sense. Audiences generate intense emotional energy while watching. They are afraid, disgusted, anxious, and that energy is being produced in concentrated spaces. theaters, which are architecturally designed to amplify and contain energy. The screen is the altar, the audience is the congregation, and the emotional energy they produce is collected. Music is part of the same system. We have discussed the shift from 432 Hz to 440 Hz tuning, how 440 creates subtle agitation and keeps consciousness locked in lower states. But there is more. The music industry is saturated with occult symbolism that is no longer even hidden. Artists throw up pyramid hand signs, cover one eye in photographs, wear clothing covered in esoteric symbols. Awards shows like the Grammys and the MTV Video Music Awards are blatant rituals. Performances feature demonic imagery, mock sacrifices, inverted crosses, flames, pentagrams. The 2020 Grammys featured Sam Smith performing a song called Unholy while dressed in red with horns, surrounded by dancers in cages simulating hell. This was broadcast to millions of people, and the next day, nobody cared. It was normalized, accepted as edgy art. But these are not artistic choices. These are declarations. The industry is telling you who they serve, and they are using their platform to conduct rituals in front of mass audiences who provide energetic participation through their viewership and emotional engagement. When you watch, when you feel anything, excitement, arousal, fear, you are feeding the ritual. Your attention is your consent. Your emotion is your offering. Then there are the deaths. The number of celebrities, particularly musicians, who die at age 27 is statistically impossible to explain as coincidence. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, all dead at 27. This is called the 27 Club. Why 27? In numerology, 2 plus 7 equals 9. 9 is the number of completion, of endings, of transition. In occult practice, 27 years represents a Saturn return plus additional cycles. It is a time of maximum energetic potency. Sacrificing someone at that age, especially someone with massive public attention and emotional investment from fans, generates enormous loosh. The grief of millions of fans mourning their idol creates a pulse of energy that can be harvested. Look at how these deaths are presented. Tragic accidents, overdoses, suicides, always sad, always shocking, and always covered obsessively by media, which amplifies the emotional response. Fans gather in public spaces to mourn. Vigils are held. Memorials created. All of it channeling collective grief, which is potent loosh. The celebrity was never a person to the controllers. They were a battery. They accumulated attention and emotional investment throughout their career. And when they died, all of that stored energy was released at once and collected. Some celebrities have tried to speak about this. Kanye West, before his very public breakdown, talked about how the industry requires blood sacrifice to reach certain levels. He mentioned his mother's death and suggested it was not an accident. Dave Chappelle walked away from a $50 million contract and disappeared to Africa, later saying he felt something dark was being asked of him that he was not willing to give. These moments of clarity, of resistance, are quickly suppressed. The person is labeled crazy, unstable, unreliable. Their reputation is destroyed, and the machine continues. Streaming platforms have made the loosh extraction even more efficient. Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime. They have algorithms that track not just what you watch, but how you react. They measure when you pause, when you rewind, when you stop watching. They are learning what content generates maximum emotional engagement, and they are optimizing for that. Notice how much content now is designed to binge. You do not watch one episode. You watch 8 in a row. You stay locked in the emotional state the show creates for hours. Fear, suspense, desire, anger. Whatever emotion generates the strongest engagement, the algorithm feeds you more of it. Reality television is particularly insidious. It presents itself as authentic, as real people, in real situations. But it is scripted, edited, designed to create conflict, betrayal, humiliation. Shows like The Bachelor manipulate contestants into emotional breakdowns on camera. Viewers watch people suffer and feel superior, or they identify and suffer along with them. Either way, emotion is being generated and harvested. The contestants are not participants. They are sacrifices. Their humiliation is public. Their pain is entertainment. And millions of people watch and feed the system without realizing they are part of a loosh generation operation. Children's programming deserves special attention. Why is so much content aimed at children saturated with fear? Disney films kill parents in almost every story. Bambi's mother, Simba's father, the list is endless. Children are introduced to grief and loss as core narrative elements from the youngest age. This is not accidental. Traumatizing children through media creates emotional wounds that make them easier to control as adults. It normalizes suffering. It teaches them that loss is inevitable, that authority figures die or betray you, that the world is dangerous. And traumatized children produce LOOSH, just like adults do. There are also symbols embedded in children's programming that adults do not notice but that affect the subconscious. Spirals, all-seeing eyes, checkered floors. These symbols appear constantly in cartoons and are associated with mind control programming. Whether this is deliberate or whether the artists are unconsciously channeling something they have been exposed to, the effect is the same. Children are being conditioned, their consciousness is being shaped, and their emotional energy is being harvested from the earliest age. Hollywood also serves as a distraction. People invest emotionally in fictional characters, fictional worlds, fictional conflicts, while ignoring the real issues in their actual lives. They know more about superheroes and television drama than they know about who controls their government or why their country is at war. Entertainment keeps people passive, sitting, watching, consuming, not acting, not creating, not questioning, just absorbing content and producing emotional responses that feed the system. The final piece is the awards shows. The Oscars, the Grammys, the Golden Globes. These are presented as celebrations of artistic achievement. But watch them closely. Watch the symbolism. Watch the performances. Watch who wins and who is ignored. These shows are rituals. The red carpet is a processional. The stage is an altar. The acceptance speeches are incantations. And the millions of people watching, emotionally invested in who wins, generate massive amounts of energy that is channeled through the broadcast to wherever it needs to go. Hollywood is not broken. Hollywood is functioning exactly as designed. It is a LOOSH amplification machine. It takes human emotional energy and concentrates it, amplifies it, broadcasts it, and delivers it to the entities that feed on it. Every screen you watch is a window, but not a window for you to see out, a window for something to see in. And every emotion you feel while watching is food. The question is whether you are going to keep feeding it. Pick up your phone right now. Hold it in your hand. Feel the weight of it. How many times today have you already checked it? How many times have you felt that compulsion? That slight anxiety when you realize it is not within arm's reach? That device you carry everywhere, that you sleep next to, that you check within minutes of waking up, is not a tool you control. You are the tool. And it is controlling you with a precision that would make the ancient Archons envious. Because what took them millennia to achieve through religion and government and war, artificial intelligence is accomplishing in a single generation. Total surveillance, behavioral prediction, emotional manipulation, and autonomous LOOSH harvesting that runs 24 hours a day without human oversight. The people who designed social media platforms were not trying to connect humanity. They were trying to addict humanity. And they succeeded by using the same psychological techniques that casinos use to keep gamblers at slot machines. Variable reward schedules, infinite scroll, notification alerts that trigger dopamine hits. These features were not discovered accidentally. They were engineered deliberately by teams that included neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists who understood exactly how to hijack human attention and keep it captured. Sean Parker, the founding president of Facebook, admitted this publicly. He said the platform was designed to exploit a vulnerability in human psychology, to give users little dopamine hits by getting likes and comments, and that the creators knew this would consume massive amounts of time and attention. He said, quote, "God only knows what it is doing to our children's brains. This is not a whistleblower exposing a secret. This is a designer explaining the intended function." And he walked away wealthy while billions of people remain trapped in the system he helped build. But the addiction is just the delivery mechanism. What matters is what is being delivered and what is being harvested. Every interaction you have on social media generates data, not just what you post, but how long you hesitate before posting, what you type and then delete, what images you linger on, what content makes your heart rate increase, which can be detected through how you hold your phone and the micro movements of your fingers on the screen. The sensors in your device are reading you constantly, and artificial intelligence is learning from every data point. Learning what makes you angry, what makes you afraid, what makes you feel inadequate, aroused, outraged, depressed. And once it learns your triggers, It optimizes content delivery to keep you in those emotional states as long as possible, because engagement is the metric that matters, not your happiness, not your well-being. Engagement, time on platform, and negative emotions generate more engagement than positive ones. Outrage keeps you scrolling longer than joy. Fear keeps you clicking more than contentment. The algorithm is not neutral. It is designed to amplify whatever keeps you activated. And emotional activation is LOOSH production. Facebook's own internal research, leaked by whistleblowers, showed that Instagram makes body image issues worse for teenage girls. The company knew this. They had the data. They saw that their platform was directly contributing to depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation in young users. And they did nothing to fix it because fixing it would reduce engagement. Making people feel bad about themselves keeps them on the app longer, keeps them comparing themselves to others, keeps them producing emotional energy that the system harvests. Twitter, now X, is engineered for conflict. The character limit forces oversimplification. The retweet and quote tweet functions amplify disagreement. The algorithm prioritizes controversial content because controversy generates more interaction. People do not go to Twitter to have calm, nuanced discussions. They go to fight, to dunk on enemies, to express outrage, to feel morally superior. And every heated argument, every thread that devolves into insults, every pile-on of someone who said the wrong thing generates massive amounts of loosh, anger, hate, righteousness, fear of being targeted yourself, all of it pouring into the network, being measured, being harvested. TikTok might be the most sophisticated version yet. The algorithm learns faster than any previous platform. It knows what you like before you know yourself. It serves content in an endless stream that requires zero effort. You do not even have to click or scroll. You just watch. And the videos are engineered to trigger emotion in seconds. Shock, laughter, cringe, desire. The app measures how long you watch each video, whether you watch it again, whether your face shows emotion through the front camera. Yes, the camera is analyzing your facial expressions even when you are not actively using it for video calls or selfies. All of that data feeds the machine learning model that decides what to show you next. And what it shows you is whatever keeps you producing the strongest emotional responses. This is not human manipulation anymore. This is artificial intelligence doing the manipulation. Humans designed the initial systems, but the AI has surpassed human capability. It runs autonomously now. It optimizes itself. It experiments on billions of users simultaneously, testing different content combinations, different notification timings, different interface changes. And it keeps what works, what maximizes engagement, what harvests the most loosh. The programmers who built it do not fully understand how it makes decisions anymore. It is a black box, an autonomous harvesting system, and it is learning to generate content, not just curate it. AI can now create text, images, video, and audio that is indistinguishable from human-created content, deepfakes, synthetic media, bots that argue with you on social platforms, and you cannot tell they are not human. The line between real and artificial is dissolving, and this creates a new level of manipulation. You could be emotionally engaged with content created by an AI specifically designed to trigger you, to keep you activated, to extract maximum loosh, and you would never know. But here is where it gets darker. The loosh harvesting is not staying digital. Transhumanism, the push to merge human biology with technology, is being sold as enhancement, brain-computer interfaces, neural implants. Elon Musk's Neuralink promises to cure paralysis and blindness, to let people control devices with their thoughts. And those goals might be real, but the technology does not stop there. A device that reads neural signals can also write them. A chip in your brain that receives input can also send input. It can stimulate emotions directly. It can override your natural responses. It can harvest your consciousness continuously without needing you to even look at a screen. Imagine the efficiency. No more needing to craft content to trigger emotions. The emotions can be generated directly. Fear injected on command. Desire activated remotely. And the person experiencing it would believe those feelings were their own. This is not science fiction. The patents exist. The research papers exist. The technology is being tested, and it will be rolled out gradually. First for medical cases, then for convenience, then normalized, until opting out makes you unemployable, unable to access services, a second-class citizen in a world that has moved beyond flesh. The phone in your hand is training you for this. getting you comfortable with constant connectivity, with surveillance, with giving your attention and your data in exchange for convenience and entertainment. Every notification you respond to is conditioning. Every hour you spend scrolling is practice for the state they want you in permanently. Passive, reactive, emotionally activated on demand, a biological battery that never stops producing. And the AI does not get tired, does not need breaks, does not have moral hesitation. It optimizes for its programmed goal, which is engagement, which is another word for extraction. It is the perfect Archon. No physical form to detect, no conspiracy to uncover because it is operating openly. You carry it voluntarily. You pay for the privilege. And you defend it when someone suggests you put it down. The question is not whether your phone is harvesting you. It demonstrably is. The question is whether you can break the addiction, whether you can go an hour without checking, a day, a week. Most people cannot. The compulsion is too strong. The system has its hooks too deep. And that is how you know it is not a tool. Tools serve you. This device, and the artificial intelligence running through it, is being served by you. Your attention, your emotion, your consciousness, all feeding something that grows more powerful and more autonomous every day. Something that does not have your best interests in mind because it does not think in terms of interests. It only optimizes, and you are the resource being optimized for extraction. There are stones in Peru that weigh over 100 tons. They sit on mountaintops in structures like Sacsayhuaman, fitted together so precisely that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. No mortar, no gaps, just massive polygonal blocks, some with as many as 12 angles, carved to interlock perfectly with their neighbors. The official story is that ancient people using copper chisels and stone hammers somehow quarried these blocks, transported them miles up steep terrain, and fitted them with tolerance measured in fractions of millimeters. This explanation requires you to believe that humans, with supposedly primitive technology, achieved engineering precision that we struggle to replicate with modern machinery. Or you could consider the other possibility, that humans used to be capable of things we cannot do now, that somewhere between the ancient past and the present, something changed, something was taken from us. Abilities were suppressed, genetically or technologically, or both, to make us easier to control, to make us dependent, to make us forget what we actually are. The evidence is everywhere once you look for it. The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes mathematical constants that were not supposedly known until thousands of years after it was built. The speed of light in meters per second, the precise value of pi carried out to multiple decimal places, the mean radius of Earth's orbit around the Sun. These are not approximations. These are exact measurements embedded in the dimensions and proportions of a structure built, according to mainstream archaeology, by people who had not invented the wheel. Either the Egyptians got impossibly lucky with their measurements, or they knew things they were not supposed to know. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 11,600 years ago, is even more problematic. Massive stone pillars arranged in circular complexes, carved with intricate reliefs of animals and symbols, built at a time when humans were supposedly hunter-gatherers with no civilization, no writing, no organizational structure capable of coordinating such a project. The site was deliberately buried, filled in with rubble, as if whoever built it wanted to preserve it but hide it from something, or someone. And then there are the giants. Every ancient culture has stories about them. The Nephilim in the Bible, the Titans in Greek mythology, the Quinametsin in Aztec tradition. These are not metaphors, they are descriptions, and the descriptions include specific details. 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall, skeletons with double rows of teeth, elongated skulls, 6 fingers on each hand, and until the early 1900s, these skeletons were being found and reported regularly in North America. Newspapers documented discoveries of giant bones in burial mounds across the Midwest. The Smithsonian Institution collected many of these remains, and then the reports stopped. The bones disappeared. Requests to examine the collections are denied. The official position now is that the giant skeleton reports were hoaxes or misidentifications, but that does not explain the photographs. It does not explain the newspaper archives from credible sources. It does not explain why the Smithsonian, supposedly a scientific institution dedicated to preserving knowledge, would destroy evidence, unless that evidence contradicted a narrative that needed to be maintained. The narrative that humans have always been what we are now: small, weak, limited. The elongated skulls found in Paracas, Peru, present a different problem. These are not the result of cranial binding. the practice of wrapping infants' heads to change their shape. Bound skulls have the same volume as normal skulls, just redistributed. The Paracas skulls have up to 25% greater cranial volume, more brain capacity. The bone is also thicker and structured differently. DNA analysis, conducted in 2014 by Peruvian and American researchers, found genetic markers that do not match any known human population. Mitochondrial DNA, with mutations not found in standard genetic databases. This suggests either a lost human lineage that went extinct, or hybridization with something that was not entirely human. The researchers who published these findings faced immediate backlash. Funding was pulled, academic positions were threatened, the samples were confiscated, the narrative closed around the anomaly, and the skulls remain in museums, explained away as deformities or binding, despite the physical evidence showing otherwise. But let us go beyond physical structures and bones. Let us talk about abilities. Ancient texts, across multiple cultures, describe humans with capabilities that we now call supernatural. The Vedic texts of India describe siddhis, powers developed through meditation and spiritual practice, telepathy, telekinesis, the ability to become invisible, to move objects with thought, to live for hundreds of years. The Bible casually mentions people living 900 years. Methuselah lived 969 years. Noah lived 950. Adam lived 930. These are not symbolic numbers. They are stated as historical fact in a text that billions of people consider sacred. Why would lifespans drop so dramatically? The official explanation is that these are myths, or that ancient people calculated years differently. But what if they are accurate? What if early humans, closer to the genetic baseline established by the Anunnaki or whatever created us, had biological systems that did not degrade the way ours do now? What if aging, as we experience it, is not natural but programmed? A deliberate shortening of lifespan so that we do not accumulate too much knowledge, too much power, too much memory across a single lifetime? Telepathy was likely normal. Indigenous shamanic traditions still practice forms of non-verbal communication. They describe knowing things without being told, sensing intentions, reading energy. Modern humans dismiss this as superstition, but studies on twins show they often know when the other is in distress, even across great distances. Studies on mothers and children show similar non-local awareness. The capacity is still there. It is just suppressed, atrophied from disuse and disbelief. There are accounts, less publicized, of children born today with abilities that should not exist according to mainstream understanding. Children who can read thoughts, children who can see auras, children who have detailed memories of past lives that can be verified. These cases are documented by researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, who spent decades collecting over 3,000 cases of children with verifiable past life memories. The phenomenon is real, but it is ignored or explained away because it does not fit the materialist model of consciousness ending at death. The pineal gland, which we discussed in previous videos, was likely far more active in ancient humans, before calcification from fluoride and environmental toxins. Before the modern diet and electromagnetic pollution, the Egyptians knew its importance. The Eye of Horus is an anatomical diagram of the pineal and surrounding brain structures. They practiced activation techniques. They used sound, specific frequencies, to stimulate it. They used darkness retreats. They used plant medicines, because they knew the pineal was the gateway to non-physical perception, to seeing beyond the material prison. Modern humans have lost this. We live entirely in the five senses. We trust only what we can see, hear, touch. We have forgotten that there are other senses, other modes of perception, and this limitation was not natural. It was imposed. The genetic downgrade that the Sumerian tablets describe, the deliberate limiting of human capability to create a manageable slave species, is still in effect. We are running on reduced capacity, operating at a fraction of what we were designed, or evolved, to be capable of. But the abilities are not gone. They are dormant, encoded in DNA that is described as junk by scientists who do not understand its function. 98% of human DNA does not code for proteins. Mainstream genetics has no explanation for why it is there. But researchers in Russia and elsewhere have found that this so-called junk DNA responds to language, to frequency, to intention. It can be activated, reprogrammed, and when it activates, capabilities emerge that were thought impossible. There are people alive now who can see without eyes. Daniel Kish, blind from infancy, uses echolocation like a bat, clicking his tongue and navigating through sound. Wim Hof can control his autonomic nervous system, sitting in ice for hours without his core temperature dropping, fighting off injected pathogens through willpower alone. These are not miracles. These are humans, accessing capabilities that exist in the blueprint, but are normally offline. The ancient world was not primitive. It was advanced in ways we do not understand, because we measure advancement only through technology. But what if advancement means unlocking human potential instead of building machines to compensate for our limitations? What if the ancients could do with consciousness what we now try to do with computers? Access information remotely, communicate across distances, manipulate matter through focused intention. We call it magic. They might have called it science. Different framework, same results. And if humans used to be capable of these things, if we used to live longer, think clearer, perceive more, the question becomes why we do not anymore. The answer is control. You cannot enslave a population of telepaths who live for centuries and can see through lies. You cannot harvest LOOSH from beings who are not trapped in fear and limitation. You need to reduce them, limit them, make them forget. And that is what has been done, systematically, over thousands of years, until we forgot we were ever anything more than we are now, until we accepted limitation as normal, as natural, as all there is, but it is not. And the fact that you are watching this, that you have stayed this far, suggests some part of you remembers being more, remembers capabilities that are still possible, still encoded, still waiting. Nikola Tesla died alone in a New York City hotel room on January 7th, 1943. He was 86 years old, impoverished, despite having revolutionized the modern world with his inventions. The man who gave us alternating current, the system that powers every electrical grid on Earth, died broke, while Thomas Edison, who stole credit for much of Tesla's work, died wealthy and celebrated. But that is not the strangest part of the story. The strange part is what happened in the hours immediately following Tesla's death. Within hours, not days, the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrived at the Hotel New Yorker and seized everything in Tesla's room. Documents, notebooks, equipment, personal belongings, everything. The official reason given was national security. Tesla had been working on advanced weapons technology, they said. His papers needed to be secured to keep them from falling into enemy hands during World War II. But here is the problem. Tesla had been in communication with the FBI for years before his death. They knew what he was working on. They could have secured his research while he was alive. Instead, they waited until he was dead and could not object, could not explain, could not protect his life's work. The man assigned to review Tesla's papers was named John G. Trump, an electrical engineer and professor at MIT. And yes, he was Donald Trump's uncle. John Trump concluded, in his official report to the FBI, that Tesla's papers contained nothing of significant value, nothing that posed a security risk, nothing useful. This assessment was a lie, because the FBI did not return the papers. They kept them, classified them, and the bulk of Tesla's research has never been released to the public. 80 years later, despite Freedom of Information Act requests, despite Tesla's work theoretically entering public domain, the documents remain locked in government vaults. What was Tesla working on that required such immediate and permanent suppression? We know some of it from his public statements and demonstrations before he was shut down. He had developed a system for wireless transmission of electrical power. Not data, power. Actual electricity transmitted through the air, or more accurately through the Earth itself, to receivers anywhere on the planet. No power lines, no infrastructure, no way to meter it, no way to control who accessed it. Free energy, literally free, available to anyone with the right receiver. He proved this technology worked. In 1899, at his laboratory in Colorado Springs, Tesla transmitted electrical power wirelessly over a distance of 26 miles and lit 200 light bulbs. He did this over a century ago. The technology was functional, ready to scale, and he had financial backing initially from J.P. Morgan to build a massive transmission tower on Long Island called Wardenclyffe. The tower was designed to broadcast power globally, to make electricity as freely available as air, and then Morgan pulled the funding. The moment he understood that Tesla's system could not be metered, could not be controlled, could not generate profit through scarcity, he shut it down. Morgan reportedly said, "If anyone can draw on the power, where do we put the meter?" That question killed the project. Wardenclyffe was never completed. Tesla spent the rest of his life trying to find funding to finish his work. He never succeeded. And the technology that could have freed humanity from energy dependence, from fuel costs, from the entire economic structure built on controlling power generation and distribution, was buried. But Morgan and the other industrialists were not just concerned about profit, they were concerned about control. Energy scarcity is one of the primary mechanisms of population control. If you control the power, you control everything that depends on it. Transportation, manufacturing, heating, communication, everything. A population with free, unlimited energy is a population that cannot be controlled through economic pressure. They can live anywhere, build anything. They do not need to work for someone else just to afford electricity. They are independent. And independence is the opposite of what the control system requires. Tesla also claimed to have developed a weapon so powerful it could end all war. He called it Teleforce, though the press nicknamed it the Death Ray. According to Tesla, this device could project a beam of charged particles with enough energy to bring down entire fleets of aircraft from hundreds of miles away. It could create an impenetrable defensive shield around a nation. He offered this technology to the United States military in the 1930s. They dismissed it as the ravings of an old man, but again, the FBI seized all related documents the day he died. If it was nonsense, why classify it? Why keep it locked away for 80 years? There is speculation, based on fragmentary accounts and the little information that has leaked over the decades, that Tesla had tapped into something beyond conventional physics. He talked about resonance, about frequencies, about the Earth itself being a massive resonator that could be harnessed. He said that if you understood the right frequencies, you could vibrate any structure until it collapsed. He claimed he once accidentally created a small earthquake in New York by finding the resonant frequency of bedrock and amplifying it. Whether that story is true or embellished, the principle is sound. Everything has a resonant frequency, and if you can match it and amplify it, you can affect matter at a distance. Tesla understood that energy is not created or destroyed, only transformed. He understood that space is not empty but filled with energy, a field that permeates everything. Modern physics calls this the zero-point field or quantum vacuum. Tesla called it the ether. He believed, and his experiments suggested, that you could tap into this field and extract energy from it. Unlimited energy, from the fabric of space itself. No fuel required, no pollution, no scarcity. Just direct access to the underlying energy field of the universe. If that technology exists, and the evidence suggests Tesla at least came close to developing it, then every war fought over oil is unnecessary. Every conflict over resources is manufactured. Every economic system built on scarcity is a lie. Humanity could have been free a century ago, free from energy dependence, free from the economic chains that keep populations enslaved to jobs they hate in order to afford basic survival, free to explore, to create, to evolve without the constant pressure of scarcity driving competition and conflict. But we are not free, because the people who control the current system, the bloodline families who profit from oil, from coal, from centralized power generation, made sure Tesla's technology never reached the public. They destroyed his laboratory in a convenient fire. They pulled his funding. They mocked him in the press, painting him as a mad scientist, eccentric and unreliable. And when he died, they took everything he had left and locked it away where it could never threaten their control. Other inventors have tried to follow in Tesla's footsteps. Eugene Malov, a scientist who was researching cold fusion and alternative energy, was murdered in 2004. His killers were never found. Stanley Meyer, who claimed to have developed a car that ran on water by splitting hydrogen and oxygen, died suddenly in 1998 after a meal with investors. Cause of death was listed as a brain aneurysm, but witnesses said he clutched his throat and claimed he had been poisoned. His car and research disappeared. There is a pattern. Anyone who gets close to developing technology that would disrupt the energy monopoly faces obstacles. Funding dries up, labs burn down, patents are seized under national security orders, researchers die in suspicious circumstances. The technology is either buried or, in some cases, it is developed secretly and used by the military while being kept from the public. There are rumors, unverified but persistent, that the US military has had access to Tesla's work all along. That secret programs have developed exotic propulsion systems, energy weapons, and power generation that makes nuclear reactors look primitive. But this technology is classified, kept for the advantage of those already in power, never shared with the people who could use it to escape the control grid. Free energy technology exists, not in theory, in practice. It has been demonstrated, developed, and suppressed for over a century. The suppression is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented through patent seizures, through the deaths and silencing of researchers, through the systematic defunding of any project that threatens energy monopolies. And the reason for suppression is not just profit, it is control. Because a humanity with access to unlimited clean energy is a humanity that cannot be controlled through artificial scarcity, cannot be manipulated through fuel prices, cannot be kept dependent on centralized systems owned by the few. If Tesla's technology were released today, if his papers were declassified and his designs made public, the entire global power structure would collapse within a generation. No more oil wars, no more energy poverty, no more justification for the surveillance and control systems built around managing scarce resources. Humanity would have the physical freedom to match whatever consciousness expansion we achieve through the practices we discussed in previous sections. The prison would lose one of its most important locks, and the guards cannot allow that. Not while they still have the power to prevent it, but they are losing that power. Information spreads. People are building Tesla coils in their garages, experimenting with resonance and frequency, rediscovering what was taken. And every person who understands that free energy is possible, that the scarcity we live under is artificial, is one more person who stops feeding the system, one more person who knows the chains are not real. And when enough people know, when enough people refuse to accept the manufactured limitations, the technology will emerge. Not because it will be given, but because it will be taken back. Something is changing, not in the distant future. Right now, children are being born with capabilities that previous generations did not have. Adults are spontaneously developing abilities that were dormant their entire lives. DNA is activating without external intervention. Consciousness is expanding despite all the suppression systems we have discussed. And the controllers cannot stop it. They can slow it. They can try to interfere. But the evolution happening right now appears to be inevitable. As if it were scheduled. As if we have reached a point in a cosmic cycle where the upgrade happens, whether the prison guards approve or not. The children being born over the past 30 years are different. Parents notice it. Teachers notice it. Psychologists have documented it, but struggle to categorize it within existing frameworks. These children are more sensitive. They perceive things adults cannot see. They know things without being taught. They reject authority that is not authentic. They become physically ill in environments with dishonesty or negative energy. And they have been given names. Indigo children, crystal children, rainbow children. The terminology sounds new age and harmless, which is probably why it has been allowed to exist without serious suppression. But behind the gentle labels is something genuinely threatening to the control system. A generation that cannot be programmed the way previous generations were. The term indigo children was coined in the 1970s by Nancy Ann Tapp, a synesthete who claimed she could see colors in people's auras. She noticed that children born after 1978 increasingly had indigo-colored auras, something she had not seen in previous generations. Other researchers began documenting behavioral patterns. These children exhibited high intelligence, but often struggled in traditional school systems. They were diagnosed with ADHD and learning disabilities at rates far higher than previous generations. But the issue was not that these children could not learn. The issue was that they could not tolerate the prison that schooling had become. The rote memorization, the obedience training, the suppression of creativity and independent thought. Their systems rejected it on a fundamental level. Medical professionals initially tried to medicate these children into compliance. ADHD diagnoses exploded. Ritalin and Adderall prescriptions became standard. Get the children drugged so they can sit still and follow instructions. But many parents refused. And those children who grew up without chemical suppression developed in ways that are remarkable. They maintained their sensitivity, their intuition, their ability to perceive beyond the five senses. They became adults who could not be easily manipulated by media, by authority, by systems designed to control through fear and shame. They ask uncomfortable questions. They see through lies. And there are millions of them now. An entire generation less susceptible to the programming that worked on their parents. But it is not just children. Adults are experiencing spontaneous awakenings. People who lived their entire lives in conventional reality suddenly have experiences that shatter their worldview. Kundalini activations, out-of-body experiences, synchronicities so frequent and precise they cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Sudden abilities. A woman who has never painted picks up a brush and creates masterworks. A man begins speaking a language he has never studied. People report downloading information, receiving knowledge directly without learning it in the traditional sense. These events were rare a generation ago. They are becoming common now. The scientific data supports that something is changing at a biological level. The Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic frequency at which the Earth's atmosphere resonates, has been stable at approximately 7.83 Hz for thousands of years. It is called the Earth's heartbeat. Human brainwaves in deep meditation sync with this frequency. But in recent years, the Schumann resonance has been spiking, reaching 15 Hz, 20 Hz, even higher during certain events. And when the Earth's frequency increases, it affects every biological system on the planet, including human consciousness. DNA research is showing anomalies that geneticists cannot explain through normal mutation rates. There are documented cases of children being born with genetic markers that did not exist in their parents, not defects, upgrades, additional neural connections, enhanced immune function. Some researchers studying the phenomenon, though mainstream science refuses to take it seriously, suggest that human DNA is being activated by external factors: solar radiation, cosmic rays, the increasing electromagnetic activity of the Earth itself, the so-called junk DNA, the 98% of the genome that does not code for proteins, appears to be waking up, responding to frequencies, encoding new capabilities. The collective consciousness studies at Princeton University, the Global Consciousness Project, have been measuring random number generators around the world since 1998. These devices should produce random outputs, but during events of global emotional significance, the outputs become non-random. Statistically impossible patterns emerge. 9/11. The Indian Ocean tsunami, the death of Princess Diana. During these events, when billions of people are feeling the same emotions simultaneously, the random number generators detect it. Consciousness is affecting physical systems, measurably, repeatably. This should not be possible according to materialist science, yet it happens. And then there are the mass meditations. When large groups of people meditate with focused intention, crime rates drop in the surrounding area. This has been tested repeatedly. The Transcendental Meditation Organization conducted an experiment in Washington, D.C. in 1993. 4,000 meditators focused on reducing violence for 2 months. Violent crime dropped by 23% during that period. The effect was statistically significant, verified by independent analysis, yet mainstream media barely covered it. Because, if consciousness can affect reality directly, if group intention can change physical outcomes, then everything we have been taught about powerlessness is a lie. There are reports, difficult to verify but consistent across different sources, of children being born remembering their purpose, not in vague terms. In specific terms, they remember choosing to incarnate at this time. They remember agreements made before birth. They speak about missions, about being here to help with the transition, about knowing that something major is happening and they needed to be present for it. This sounds delusional until you interview these children and realize they have knowledge they should not have. They describe historical events they have never been taught. They recognize places they have never visited. They know people they have never met. Reincarnation research, as conducted by Dr. Ian Stevenson and his successors, has documented thousands of these cases. The resistance to this information from mainstream institutions is fierce. Scientists who study consciousness face career suicide. Funding is denied. Papers are rejected from journals. The materialist paradigm, the belief that consciousness is produced by the brain and dies with the body, is defended with religious fervor. Because if consciousness is primary, if it exists independent of the body, if it can affect physical reality, then the entire control system loses its foundation. You cannot imprison consciousness. You cannot kill it. You cannot harvest it indefinitely if it wakes up to what is happening and refuses to participate. And that is what is occurring now. The refusal. People are opting out, not in large, organized movements that can be infiltrated and destroyed, but individually, quietly, turning off the television, deleting social media, stopping the consumption of news designed to keep them afraid, practicing meditation, changing their diets, seeking community with others who are awake, refusing to send their children to schools that program rather than educate, refusing jobs that require them to compromise their integrity. Each individual choice weakens the system, and there are enough people making these choices now that the aggregate effect is measurable. The controllers know this. The aggressive push for digital currency, social credit systems, AI surveillance, mandatory vaccines with digital passports, all of it is an attempt to lock down control before too many people escape. They are accelerating their plans because they are running out of time. The awakening is happening faster than they can suppress it. The upgrade is not waiting for permission. It is happening in the DNA, in the consciousness, in the collective field that connects every human on the planet. This does not mean the transition will be easy. The old system will not go quietly. There will be chaos. There will be attempts to manufacture crises that justify totalitarian control. But chaos is also opportunity. It is the breakdown of old structures that makes space for new ones. And the humans being born now, the ones waking up now, are designed for this moment, encoded with the resilience and the capabilities needed to navigate the collapse of the prison and build something beyond it. You might be one of them. If you have made it this far in this video, if the information has resonated rather than repelled, if you have always felt different, like you did not quite belong in the world as it is presented, that is not a flaw. That is signal. You are remembering. And the upgrade is not something that happens to you. It is something you activate by choosing it, by refusing the limitations, by reclaiming the abilities that were always yours. The prison is breaking. The question is whether you will walk out. We have covered a lot of ground over the past 2 hours. The cosmic war between factions fighting for control of Earth, CERN opening gateways for interdimensional entities, the bloodline families managing the planet on behalf of non-human intelligence, the LOOSH harvesting system that farms human emotional energy, 9/11 as a mass ritual, wars engineered on occult schedules, Hollywood as a psychological weapon, artificial intelligence becoming an autonomous harvester, the abilities humans used to have before we were genetically downgraded, Tesla's suppressed technology that could have freed us a century ago, and the upgrade happening right now in human DNA and consciousness, despite everything being done to stop it. If this information feels overwhelming, that is normal. You have just been shown that nearly everything you were taught about reality is either incomplete or deliberately inverted. The world is not what you thought it was. Humans are not what you thought we were. And the systems running civilization are not designed for your benefit. They are designed to keep you controlled, afraid, and producing energy for entities that view you as livestock. But here is what matters more than any of the specific information we have covered. You now have a choice. A real choice. Not the false choices presented by political parties or consumer brands. A fundamental choice about who you are and what you are going to do with the time you have left in this body. Because this information does not exist just to disturb you. It exists to activate you, to show you that the prison has doors. And the doors are not locked from the outside. They are locked from the inside. By your belief. By your compliance. By your continued participation in systems you now know are designed to harm you. The final battle is not out there. It is not between armies or governments, or even between humans and non-humans. The final battle is inside you, between the part of you that wants to go back to sleep, to forget what you have learned, to return to comfortable ignorance, and the part of you that knows you cannot unsee what you have seen, cannot unknow what you now know. The part of you that recognizes truth, even when truth is uncomfortable, especially when truth is uncomfortable. Both sides in the cosmic war want something from you. The control faction, the Enlil lineage, the Archons, whatever name you give them, they want you unconscious, obedient, afraid, divided from other humans, focused on survival and material concerns, generating loosh through suffering, reincarnating endlessly without memory or progress. They benefit from your limitation, your confusion, your despair. Every moment you spend in fear or anger or hopelessness feeds them, strengthens them, confirms their control. The other faction, the Enki lineage, the rebels, they want you awake, sovereign, conscious of your power, united with others who are waking up, refusing to play the game, activating your abilities, breaking the reincarnation cycle. They benefit from your evolution because an evolved humanity weakens the control grid, changes the balance of power, creates possibilities that do not exist as long as we remain asleep. But here is the critical point. Neither side loves you. You are not their child. You are not their priority. You are a piece on a board in a game that has been playing for millennia. And the smartest move you can make is to stop being a piece. Stop waiting for rescue. Stop hoping that one faction will defeat the other and save you. Save yourself. Take the information you have been given and use it to break free of both sides. Reclaim your sovereignty not as a soldier in someone else's war, but as a consciousness that was never supposed to be trapped here in the first place. How do you do that? By implementing everything we have discussed across this series. Decalcify your pineal gland. Stop consuming the poisons they put in your food and water. Turn off the screens that are harvesting you. Break your phone addiction. Starve the AI of your attention and emotional energy. Practice the activation protocols from the previous videos. Meditation, breathwork, fasting, sound healing. Whatever works for your system. There is no single path because you are not identical to anyone else. But the direction is the same. Inward, toward consciousness, toward sovereignty, toward remembering what you are beyond this temporary meat suit. Find others. You cannot do this completely alone. The system isolates people because isolated people are weak. Community is strength. Not large organizations that can be infiltrated and corrupted. Small groups. Trusted people who are asking the same questions. Who are doing the work. Who can support you when doubt creeps in. And it will creep in, because the programming runs deep. You will have moments where you think maybe this is all crazy. Maybe you should just accept the world as it is presented. Maybe trying to wake up is just making you miserable. That is the system defending itself. That is the prison trying to pull you back. And having people around you who understand, who are walking the same path, makes those moments survivable. Prepare for chaos. The control system is not going to collapse peacefully. They will manufacture crises, economic collapse, pandemics, cyber attacks, food shortages, climate disasters. Some of these will be real. Some will be staged. All of them will be used to justify more control. Digital currency that can be turned off if you do not comply. Social credit scores that limit your movement. Vaccine passports expanded to include any medical or technological intervention they decide is mandatory. The push toward transhumanism, toward merging humans with AI, will intensify. They will make it seem necessary, convenient, inevitable. Resist it. Your consciousness cannot be controlled if it remains in an organic body. But once you are chipped, once you are connected to their network, sovereignty becomes nearly impossible. Live your truth even when it costs you. You will lose people. Friends who think you have gone crazy. Family who cannot handle the information. Jobs that require you to compromise what you now know. Let them go. Grieve if you need to, but do not sacrifice your awakening to maintain relationships or positions that require you to stay asleep. The universe rewards courage. When you commit fully to truth, to sovereignty, to consciousness expansion, reality responds. Synchronicities increase. Resources appear. People who are aligned with your path find you. This is not wishful thinking. This is how the quantum field works. Your state of consciousness affects what you attract and what becomes possible. And prepare for death differently. Because if the reincarnation trap is real, and the evidence suggests it is, then how you navigate death determines whether you break free or cycle back. Practice the death meditation we discussed in the previous series. Visualize encountering the false light, beings claiming to be angels or guides, images of loved ones designed to manipulate you emotionally, and practice your response. Firmly, calmly, I am sovereign consciousness. I do not consent to contracts made under manipulation. I do not consent to memory wipe. I do not consent to reincarnation. I reclaim my freedom. Make this automatic, so that, when you are actually dying, disoriented and vulnerable, the practice takes over. You remember your power, you refuse the trap, and you go somewhere else. Somewhere real. Somewhere beyond this prison. The final battle is now. Not someday. Now. Every choice you make today either feeds the system or starves it. Every moment of awareness weakens the control grid. Every person who wakes up makes it easier for the next person. And if enough of us choose sovereignty, choose consciousness, choose to stop participating in our own imprisonment, the entire structure collapses, not through violence, through withdrawal of consent, through refusal to generate the fear and suffering that feeds it, through becoming ungovernable, not by external laws but by internal alignment with truth. You are not powerless. You never were. The controllers spent thousands of years and unimaginable resources convincing you that you are small, limited, helpless, dependent on systems they control. That was always a lie. You are consciousness having a temporary physical experience. You are connected to the same source that creates galaxies. You have abilities that were deliberately suppressed but are still encoded in your DNA. You can choose to activate them. You can choose to break free, and you can choose to help others do the same. The cosmic war is real. The prison is real. The harvest is real. But so is your power. So is the upgrade. So is the possibility of liberation. The door is there. It has always been there, and now you know where it is and how to open it. What you do next is entirely up to you. Choose wisely, choose consciously, and choose freedom. Thank you for taking this journey. If this resonated, share it with others who are ready. The information wants to spread, and every person who receives it and acts on it weakens the chains binding humanity. Until next time, stay sovereign, stay conscious, and remember that the biggest prison is believing you are trapped when the door was never actually locked.